Do you know how many books were originally submitted for the prize this year?
Yes, 90.
90.
Yeah, and that actually represents a very significant increase from last year, which was the first year in which we've gone to this format. Last year, I think we had 54. So this year, 90. One thing that, and one thing that I might just observe, which is something that actually our good friends from Coleman Getty and the Man Booker have told us, that in fact, when you have books entered by publishers, you would assume that since for publishers it's just win-win if a book is shortlisted or longlisted, that publishers would be eager to enter books, but not at all. For some reason or other, we have to work very, very hard to get publishers to enter books, even though all they have to do is just put in some details online and send us 5 copies of the book. Not easy to do it. So we spend a lot of time just getting those 90 entries. But actually, in fact, I think it's going to get easier and easier as the prize becomes more established.
And can authors submit their own work?
No. We took a decision that the books need to be published, and just as with the Man Booker Prize, we decided that they should all come from the publishers themselves. And the reason for that is that we don't allow an infinite number of books to come from one publisher. Otherwise, our judges would protest, or perhaps they wouldn't even sign on. We would be chasing judges for half the year.
So do you limit it, like for a publishing, say you can only put in 5 entries? Or?
The answer is that for 3 books maximum per imprint. Mm-hmm. So if you're a multinational with several imprints, you get 3 books per imprint.
Why do the books need to be translated into English? Why don't you accept as well books written in other languages?
Yeah, we have considered this. The problem there is that you would need an enormous judging panel to do that. And so we decided that since English happens to be, for better or worse, the international language, that we would accept either books written originally in English or translated into English. So that's our basic framework. But it's an interesting idea, and if we had infinite resources, that's what we would do. But unfortunately, we can't do it.
3 out of the 7 on the shortlist have been translated into English.
I mean, our hope, for example, it seems, for example, in South Korea, that only about 2 or 3 books per year get translated into English novels, which is very surprising when you think about it. So our aim is to make sure that more and more of that happens. So with that book being shortlisted, I'm sure that is a way of encouraging that translation process in that country. Yes.
For the translated books, what's the prize share? Which does each get?
Yes, there is a prize. The translator gets $5,000 for being the translator. The prize for the winning author is $30,000 undivided. He or she gets that $30,000. So there's an extra $5,000 in the case of a translated work. And in most years, we've had to pay out, because most of our books have been translated. But we do that with great delight, because we think that translation is a really, really important issue. And we are very happy to be a prize that encourages translation. Oh, sorry, actually, so since you've had one already, maybe I'll just lady first, and then we'll come back.
Can I thank you on behalf of those authors that were censored in the country that they come from, and only when they came onto the long list of the Man Asian Prize were actually recognized by the country of their origin. In our case, an Iranian author, Mahmoud Dolatabadi, who is censored in Iran, and when his book reached the long list, the official Iranian television acknowledged that the eminent Iranian author was on the long list, despite the fact that his book has not been published in Iran. So thank you on behalf of his work and his being nominated for the long list.
Thank you very much, and thank you for sharing that with us, because I had no idea that that was the case. So that's a very significant thing to happen. Thank you. Sorry, one more question here, I think.
Razia, you spoke about how at the end of these books you'd feel a little bit transformed. Are you able to give an example of what sort of emotions which books gave to you?
Well, I learned a lot from Amitav Ghosh's book, which is this kind of epic, sweeping historical novel. So I learned lots because his books are so meticulously researched. So I felt rather smug by the end of it, I suppose. But I knew a lot more about the 19th century Opium Wars, and also how it just made you think about how prescient so much of what he writes about in an historical novel is today. You know, the whole notion of globalization and free trade and the ascendancy of the East is very much there in his books. And in the context of a book like Jamil Ahmed's The Wandering Falcon, which is just a absolutely beautifully put together series of stories which just take you to a part of the world that we hear in the news all the time, you know, the borders of Iran, Afghanistan and Pakistan. But just you get a sense of the humanity of the people who live in those places. And in a way, I suppose, with each of these books, it wasn't just about learning about the countries and the places that they were writing about. It really is about how a kind of the cumulative impact of what a novel can do, how important the form of the novel still remains, you know, despite the fact that we are inundated with all kinds of other distractions in 21st century life. It just feels very, very a crucial part of cultural exchange remains how people talk about, debate, read, criticize novels. That I would say that probably is the most profound thing for me in having judged. I mean, I'm a big reader anyway, which I suspect is why I was asked to be part of the panel.
We heard about that.
And you know, I just think there is something about literary prizes, however contentious they can be, however much people can potentially vilify them as being, you know, very subjective. Of course they are. You know, they are. You're choosing 3 judges in our case, you know, who all have their own sets of concerns and backgrounds and so on. But in the end, what comes through time and time again is the power of storytelling. And if you don't have that, it kind of defeats the object of even having a prize. I mean, there's all kinds of little things that come out of every single literary prize, and as there will be with this shortlist. But I think ultimately, if we can't recognise that the novel still holds incredible sway over our collective consciousness and in cultures everywhere. Not just in places in the West where we think there is always the demise of the novel is constantly being written about. It's just not true. You know, I travel on public transport everywhere I go. People read all the time, and that feels very, very important still.
I'm wondering whether there's another question from Hong Kong, or have we exhausted?
Yes, we do.
There is another. Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Annemarie Evans, South China Morning Post. It's been described as the Asian book. You've already had a crossover of authors from, or at least one author coming from the Man Asian Literary Prize over to the Booker Prize. The 7 shortlisted ones this year How many of those would you say are of Booker Prize standard?
I've never been a Booker Prize judge. It's hard for me to gauge, although I have reported on it for many years, as I said. I would argue that every single one of these books would merit a place on a long list or a short list on the Booker Prize. They are literary. They deal with what it is to live in the world today, even in the historical novels. They have a quality to the writing and the way in which they're structured. Again, I go back to this idea of, the books that we chose because they worked as novels and not necessarily because they were dealing with important ideas, although that is the case in many of them in particular. But in general, it was always to do with the literary quality of the work, and how it felt to us as readers, as a story, as a cohesive story. So in that context, I would say, yeah, absolutely, I would put my weight behind each and every one of these as being a contender for the Man Booker. But whether these are the sorts of books that publishers who publish them would be willing to submit, given the cumulative cachet of the Booker, I don't know. I should call it. Sorry. Get into trouble.
Ian has a question.
I'm Ian Trewin, the literary director of the Man Booker Prize. So I'm very interested in that question from the South China Post representative. Amitav Ghosh's previous novel, this one that's been shortlisted this time is part of, I think, a sort of loose trilogy, was indeed shortlisted for the Man Booker 2 years ago. And if you look at the history of the Man Booker Prize, it's now over 40 years old. We've had several winners from Asia, and I think that's indicative of the fact that there is such high quality coming out of Asia, and that it is possible to be shortlisted and indeed ultimately to win the Man Booker Prize. So I've no idea about this year's shortlist because I haven't read any of them, and this is one of the pleasures to come, I think, and this is why this prize is so important, that it actually alerts this country, as we're speaking from London, to fiction that we might not otherwise be aware of. And I think that's part of the interchange that is so, so important. It'll be very interesting to see which of these books are picked up by UK publishers and ultimately may well be entered for a future Man Booker Prize. But I think that it seems to me, from where history is concerned, that the writing in Asia is very strong and can only get stronger.
If anyone's got any more questions.
I see.
We've got one in Hong Kong.
Another one in Hong Kong?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe this has to be the last one. Sorry.
Yes. Kelly Falconer from the Asia Literary Review. My question sort of follows on from the last two. With the rise of, as the sun rises over Asia and as more Asian writers are taking ownership of the English language, I wonder if you believe that the Man Asian Literary Prize will one day soon become the most preeminent prize in the world.
David, I think I'll let you answer that one.
The short answer to that is we hope so. Okay, I think that we probably, I'm getting the nod to it's time on that splendid note to end. And can I just simply say one thing, that where the Man Booker Prize has been so important to us, and that is that what we observe with the Man Booker Prize is that it foments conversation. When we have the shortlist, people want to read it, and there's a conversation on many different levels. We have reviewers, but then we have the conversations of people around the dinner table, people at work, people sitting on the bus reading, or the train, reading novels that they might not otherwise read. I think this is the power of a prize, and it's also the significance of a shortlist, because between the shortlist and the announcement of the winner is a time when people's attention is focused on literature, and people participate in the literary culture in a way that they don't normally necessarily do. So I think that this is a very, very important thing. And I just want to say one thing that has astounded us, and that is that out there on the web, there is a group of people who they call themselves the jury, the shadow jury. Shadow, it's very dark. The shadow jury of the Man Asian Literary Prize. And they have read all the books on the long list. And on their website, you can find many different reports. And I don't know whether you actually had a chance to look at this. It's an amazing enterprise. 5 or 6 bloggers, all part of the literary scene in their own countries, and it's completely international, are reading these books and discussing them among themselves. So if the prize doesn't do anything else, at least it foments conversation, it creates attention to literature, and I think that's what we're all keen to see. So thank you very, very much for coming today to help us celebrate this launch of the 2011 Man Asian Literary Prize shortlist. Thank you very, very much. Thank you in Hong Kong.